So our project dealt with a topic that has been rarely explored before, that is the Mongolian diaspora. We were tasked with building an engagement strategy for the Mongolian diaspora. And the International Organization for Migration, our client, it's an organization that comes under the broader UN umbrella with specific migration-related mandate. And among its mandate points is to ensure an orderly and humane management of migration, and also to ensure that practical solutions are found to migration issues faced by different countries. So we were there to find some practical solutions, but we found initially to our shock that there was very little information available. In fact, when you type Mongolian diaspora on Google Scholar, you'll hardly find 2 or 3 articles with some footnotes. But still, the four of us were from individual countries who and had migrated to Canada were in a good position to do so. Like we had Anthony from Ghana, Jemimah from Nigeria, and 2 of us, Anoushka and I, from India. We were in a good position to have some reference points using which we could understand the issues faced by Mongolians living in North America. So let us look at these issues through the eyes of three people, 3 Mongolians. So we have Benardin, Kulan, and Temulan. So all the 3 have something in common apart from the fact that they are of Mongolian ethnicity. That is the fact that they want to give something back to their home country, but feel that there is no effective mechanism to do so. They would like their children to learn the language. Their children who have been born in a different country have little connection with their home culture, but they feel that there is not enough like there's no system to do so, and they also feel that the Mongolian government has not done enough to take care of their needs. So we would look at some of these issues in greater detail as we proceed. But before that, let us get introduced to the Mongolian diaspora, for which I'd like to pass the mic to Jemimah.
Thank you, Harry. I would like to define what we mean by a Mongolian diaspora. For the purposes of our project, a Mongolian diaspora is a Mongolian or a person of Mongolian origin living outside their country of birth or descent. When Mongolians got their freedom to relocate under the 1992 Constitution, they decided that they would venture off the borders of their country to search for better opportunities, which led to the formation of the post-Cold War Mongolian diaspora. Within this category of 130,000 to 200,000 people, the Mongolians here in North America, especially in the United States and Canada, were the ones who we sort of were our target audience, numbered around 34,000. These Mongolians had been living in North America for 5 years or more and were willing to invest their resources by giving something back to the motherland. Next slide, please. So for our project ambition, we identified that there was a lack of a comprehensive strategy and the need of a systemic engagement with the Mongolians in North America, with the goal that if this is implemented and it's successful, it could be applied across the board with other Mongolian diasporas around the world. The lack of a comprehensive strategy was further shown when we conducted our one-on-one interviews and also focus groups. We had 13 one-on-one interviews and 1 focus group, and the data that was provided was used in writing our analysis and recommendations, of which my teammates are going to go into more in detail at the end of the presentation. But now I would like to hand it off to Anthony, who would be talking about major themes.
Thank you, Jemimah. So when we first started out this project, we researched numerous topics that we all felt strongly about, but we weren't sure if they coalesced into something more cohesive. So we decided to go back to the chopping block and start out with the basics. In researching IOM files and reports, we found the themes of trust, engagement, and mobilization. Throughout our interviews, we kept hearing similar sentiments of the distrust that the diaspora had of the government. Without trust, both IOM and the governments cannot have consistent and productive engagements with the diaspora. And without both, the mobilization of resources to activate the diaspora becomes inefficient. Separately, they all serve to bolster the needs of the diaspora and the returns to the government, but in tandem, they expand on the benefits exponentially. And with that, I'd like to pass it back to my colleagues, Jemimah and Harry, to continue with our field analysis.
Thank you, Anthony. So for our field analysis, these themes were strategically chosen because we saw these areas as integral to building a successful diaspora engagement strategy. Also, these areas are quite popular in research papers in engaging and building a relationship with diasporas. So with the Diaspora Association, the Mongolian community in North America, while relatively small, have made great strides to contribute both to their host country and back to Mongolia. One way that they've done this was during COVID, they rallied together to ensure that the needs of Mongolians living in North America were met, and also that they also sent donations back to Mongolia to help those who were in need and kids who were in orphanages. The majority of our respondents were career professionals, with some students also represented, working across a range of public and private sectors. During the research process, interview respondents were asked about what they thought of the government's effort in building a diaspora engagement strategy through Mongolian missions in their region. One diaspora responded representative, as you can see on the slide, said that it would be a great benefit to the government if they could partner with diaspora associations, especially on cultural events or language programs, and that would be a way to build a stronger link with the Mongolian diaspora. Under the theme of knowledge transfer, we looked at the ways in which diasporas, Mongolians in North America were contributing to Mongolians' development, thus helping to transfer their skills and expertise in building Mongolians' human capital. One of our respondents was a professor who, through her network, invited two guest lecturers from Mongolia to Washington, D.C. to learn best practices in teaching methodologies that could be transferred back into the classrooms in Mongolia. And she's a strong advocate of knowledge transfer and sending skills and expertise back home. And this was very important because the teachers were able to take those practices back to Mongolia. And we also found out that from these interviews, if individuals had the opportunity and the resources, they would participate in furthering Mongolians' interests at home and abroad, thus leaving a door open for the government to partner with them. I will pass it back to Harry to finish on the themes.
Thank you, Jemimah. So the next set of themes we looked at had to do with intergenerational engagement. So what is intergenerational engagement? It is the way a generation of migrants engages with its subsequent generations, and the way they collectively and individually engage with their homeland. So we found that like Mongolians who migrated and were of the older age cohort were worried that their children were not like getting any sense of what their homeland, their home culture was about. So this is something we thought it would be interesting to look into. And one important part of intergenerational engagement is language. Because just like many other cultures, we found that Mongolians have a very strong attachment to their language. In fact, a Mongolian linguist we spoke to based in Washington, D.C. said that he would, if someone is able to speak Mongolian, he would consider him a Mongolian, not necessarily someone of Mongolian ethnicity. So leaving aside the fact that there could be an element of exaggeration in this, we felt that this showed the kind of attachments Mongolians have to their language. And the fact that they were not able to teach their children their language showed that an important cultural element was probably getting lost. So were there language learning programs available? There were some programs available, but people said that they lacked the rigor or the methodology necessary to give children any understanding of the language. So this is where we stepped in. So we'll next get to our results on these themes and some others. And for that, I would like to pass on the mic to Anoushka and Anthony.
Thanks, Hari. So to go over our recommendations, Anthony and I are going to do that. And these recommendations have been developed keeping in mind the insights that we gained from our interviews, as well as the case studies that we looked at during our research. For our client, we've developed a project proposal that has detailed information on these recommendations, as well as their strategies for implementation. But first, let's look at the diaspora policy. A key insight from a report written by the Council of Mongolians Living Abroad was that there needs to be a more cohesive Mongolian there needs to be a more progressive Mongolian policy that, for its diaspora that advocates for cooperation, mutual information exchange, and understanding between the Mongolian diaspora and the Mongolian government. So our recommendation tried to build on this, advocating for a cohesive policy framework that had the support of high-level actors in Mongolia's policy space. We also recommended the design and implementation of a diaspora policy guide that would ensure that we could consolidate and increase the philanthropic contributions from the diaspora. Next, let's look at the local hometown associations, which we modeled on Moldova's program towards its diaspora. We chose Moldova's program because of its popularity and its effectiveness. It was launched in 2015, and by the end of 2020, the Moldovan diaspora had contributed approximately $2.6 million to the Moldovan economy. In Mongolia, we proposed that this model would be a decentralized model that would allow for the diaspora to directly contribute to local communities at home through a transfer of ideas, technology, technical expertise, and financial resources. The projects would be finalized keeping in mind the expertise of the diaspora and the needs of the local communities. And the way the program is devised, we hope that this not only builds transparency and accountability into the process, but allows the diaspora to contribute to Mongolia's growth. I'll now pass it on to Anthony to go over the next set of recommendations.
Thank you, Anoushka. So, in coming up with recommendations that address both intergenerational engagements and language, we introduced two programs that would operate together, but can operate separately. The Mongolian Heritage Program, modeled after the Taglit Birthright Program, aims to engage young Mongolians in the diaspora for generations to come. Now, the Taglit Birthright Program was once too a bold initiative in the past, but since its 2 decades of activity, it has brought back $1.5 billion to the Israeli economy. Now, the Mongolian diaspora in comparison is rather young, and although current engagement practices are being developed, there is little focus on subsequent generations. This is where the Heritage Program would come in to facilitate a 14-day summer camp to be held in Mongolia. The first year of this program will target 100 participants aged 5 to 18 with a 50-50 split in gender. Participants are to be selected through a lottery system through a neutral third party to increase transparency and reduce the risk of favoritism. The program will include workshops, events, tours, and a variety of classes ranging from language to music. This is where the Tamil initiative will come in as a core course within the program. This initiative was based on the Tamil diaspora within Canada and the US that have proven to be effective in teaching Tamil to their communities. The curriculum for this opportunity would first start out with surveys to assess the needs of respondents. Second, qualified linguists and teachers will be recruited to teach the Mongolian language. Lastly, tests will be administered to determine language proficiency. With those combined initiatives, we hope to see an increase in interest and connection with Mongolian culture and language, and interest in Mongolia in general for future generations to come. And with that, I'd like to pass it back to Anoushka to end our presentation.
Thanks, Anthony. So I'm going to quickly talk you all through how our recommendations fit into some of the earlier themes that we talked about: trust, engagement, and mobilization. In this table, the blue dots are placed where an initiative directly addresses a theme, and the red dots are placed where it has the potential to address a theme, but probably over a longer period of time. First, the diaspora policy. This addresses the themes of engagement and mobilization because it provides our stakeholders with the tools and resources to establish successful partnerships. In the case of local hometown associations, if successful, this will address the lack of trust that currently exists between the diaspora and the government. And it also provides opportunities for the diaspora to engage with local communities at home. In the case of the Mongolian heritage and language programs, these allow for the diaspora to engage with the Mongolian culture and Mongolian language. So in conclusion, if these recommendations are implemented, we're hoping to see that the IOM and the government can establish a comprehensive strategy that meets the needs of the diaspora and benefits Mongolians at home at the same time. With that, we come to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we're open to any questions.
Thank you. A fantastic presentation again. We'll start the questions as we do with our representatives from IOM's office, and that is Victor and Yamba. So I'll ask them if they have any comments or questions to start us off.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the team for the great work that was done. Greetings from Erdenet, which is the second city in Mongolia where we have our field mission now. And that's the place where, by the way, President Zelensky of Ukraine spent 4 years of first years of his life. That's just a fact. I wanted to say that the project and generally the presentation and the output that came out from the work of this group was very much in line with what we usually see when a country starts working with diaspora. And there were also a lot of new interesting ideas and new interesting insights that are very timely now that IOM and the government of Mongolia is just starting to put together the kind of the first bits and pieces to start working on a comprehensive and strategic engagement to mobilize diaspora for the development of the country. It is a good time because it's interesting that COVID basically brought the attention, the light on the Mongolian diaspora, because when the borders closed, suddenly a lot of people found themselves, locked out of the country, and that followed with some protests even at the Mongolian embassies all around the world, including in the US. So kind of came into the attention of Mongolian media and also Mongolian people, Mongolian government. And so COVID helped us, bring back this issue on the table of the politicians. I think another important issue that the team doesn't know is that we already managed to use some of the elements of the project proposal that they've done for us in order to mobilize $100,000 from the IOM Development Fund that we just secured also with the participation of the consular department of the Mongolian ministry, exactly to support the first steps in building that diaspora policy, in supporting a good participatory process, engaging, diaspora, first of all from the US, but also from South Korea, as the team mentioned, where we have the biggest concentration of Mongolians abroad. And also to start digging deeper into some of the issues that we're also extensively discussing with the team, as for example, the out-of-country voting, the involvement of the Mongolian diaspora in the voting for the parliamentary election, but also for presidential elections. So overall, not so many questions from my side, just to say that it was a very interesting, a very good work. I'd like to thank the team for looking deep into the available practices that came from, as the team said, from their own exposure as a diaspora, it was interesting to see the openness of the team to kind of apply some of the good practices of their own diasporas in Canada, in transferring them to the Mongolian diaspora in Canada and the US, but also the openness to look into other good practices, be it Taglit in Israel or the hometown associations in Moldova and so on. So big thanks from our side. And the project that was delivered to us is very valuable. As I said, it will be used not just as one single piece, but also as components that we'll be using here and there to contribute ultimately to have a bigger and more strategic and more cohesive engagement of diaspora into the development of Mongolia. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I speak for all of us when I say we really enjoyed the experience and learning and using some of our own experiences to help propel this project forward.
Jemimah, do you have anything to add, or was it?
Yeah, well, like, first of all, I would like to say that the team did a great job in on working on this project, and then as a like product of the whole like success, they have produced this amazing project proposal that just Victor said we have been developing into a project. And just one more thing on that is like to prove the good work that they have done, we would also be arranging another presentation that is specifically for our major partners and national institutions that we plan to work on diaspora issue, which team will also be like present. So I would also like to state this here, and thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the support that y'all have provided us. They were always available for we used to meet very regularly, and it really, really helped us. Thank you.
Thank you again, Victor and Jemimah, for the support you showed to the team. With that, I'll pass it to the faculty lead, which is Julian Dierkes, for any comments and questions.
Thank you, Kai. Thank you, team. Well done with the presentation. Jemimah and Victor, thanks so much for getting up early in the morning, too. We realize that it's very early in Mongolia and that you're up in Erdenet on a field mission, so thanks for that. Where you started with this trust engagement mobilization piece has always been, all along, was an interesting way to do this, right? And really kind of productive. And I think as Jemimah and Victor have also emphasized, you've made some really good recommendations. Let's think of 10 years ahead, 15 years, right? So some of these recommendations are implemented, they're successful, let's hope they are. What does engagement look like at that point? How is the Mongolian diaspora involved in 10 years in Mongolia's social or economic development?
Okay, I'll start and then we can probably pass it around. But I was thinking about this, and I think the way to start is what IOM has already started doing, and it's also outlined in our project proposal, which is first to actually map the diaspora and understand where they are in the world and what their expertise is, what are they good at. And so maybe 10 years down the line, where we're seeing this is, once you know where the diaspora is, you can not only meet their needs, but also benefit from their expertise. And this goes back to one idea that the client and we have been discussing since the beginning, which is the theme of reciprocity, where you can't just expect Mongolians abroad or the diaspora to contribute to their country if you're not meeting their needs first. So that's also where some of our projects come into play. I'll let everyone speak in detail about them. But in the case of the language program or the heritage program, they're more focused on what does the diaspora need right now and how can we meet that? And then gradually we would move on to, say, the knowledge transfer piece or the local hometown associations, which looks at, okay, if you all do feel, if there is enough will and enough resources, then you're ready to contribute back home. So that's probably where we see it. But
thank you, Professor Dierkes, for the question. Before answering that, I would like to qualify that Despite being small in number, 130,000, the diaspora cannot be spoken of as a monolith. So our focus was primarily on Canada and the US, but the biggest section of Mongolian diaspora is in South Korea. And these are people who go there for a few years and come back. Whereas Mongolians in North America are people who are likely to come here and stay for longer durations, for 5 years, 10 years, and probably more. So even when we look at 5, 10 years down the line, the needs of these two kinds of diasporas would have to be different. So when it comes to the South Korean diaspora, which is more interested in probably sending remittance, maybe there could be advocacy for better labor rights. Maybe there could be advocacy for maybe better voting rights, the establishment of voting stations. When it comes to diaspora in Canada, US, and maybe other affluent countries in the Western Hemisphere, what I would say is, let's say we introduce this language program is something that's going to be a really complicated affair. So it will take at least 5 years to get institutionalized properly, and then a program evaluation to happen, and then it. So personally, I started looking at the Tamil language initiative because of my own personal interest, and I saw how Tamil language learning was instituted in Canada and the US in the 80s and 90s. So in Canada, 80s is when Tamils started migrating from Sri Lanka. At that time, there was not much of a program, but as they started mobilizing and as they started gathering funds by 90s, they started lobbying to different associations, different schools. Similarly, in the case of the US, it was more driven by associations of Indian Tamils who went there. So once the diaspora population reaches a certain number, which is likely in the future, there is a greater capacity for institutionalization. And maybe the budget that is currently not available to spend on stuff like diaspora programs will become available at that time. And also, when it comes to voting rights, maybe right now the turnout is low, but later on, maybe the voter consciousness may increase to influence elections in a bigger way. So maybe there will be more initiatives taken on the part of the government to introduce those steps. So I would also like to pass on to Jemimah.
I didn't think I had much to add after that, but I would say that I looked specifically into diaspora associations, and I feel like where there's been the greatest need or the greatest opportunity would be the government of Mongolia, like partnering with associations, especially with cultural events. And that is where the intergenerational piece also comes into play, because kids do attend those events. And many of the things we heard the diaspora say too was that they like putting on a lot of competitions where with children participating, either playing a Mongolian musical instrument or maybe practice a spelling bee competition. That was another way that we saw that there were future opportunities there where the government can also get in touch with the future generations and build that presence, and also get them more excited about Mongolia. And also the Tigrid Birthright program is another way that we know that if they start that now, in the future, 10 years from now, would still be ongoing, because it's something that is crucial, it's something that is important, and it's something that, would last generations. And I'll pass it on to Anthony if he has anything to say.
I'll just add briefly, I think something that's very important for this project to move on forward was our focus in making sure that these recommendations were sustainable. And something that personally that I've learned from my dad, my parents, was that projects have to be sustainable for them to continue to last 10 or 15 years or however many decades that you want them to last for. So it's a bottom-up process at some times, and dialogue needs to be had where both the beneficiaries and the implementers are talking to each other and listening. And yeah, I'll just end it with that.
Fantastic, thank you. And with that, we'll open to questions in the room and online. I know that we have one question online already, and I'll pass you the mic to read it. And I saw some hands up in the room as well. So maybe we can keep the questions and the responses relatively short, because there are more hands going up. Easy. Okay, I saw Sering's hand up, and we'll start with Sering then.
Thank you very much. In your recommendation on the heritage learning, you said you modeled, Israeli program. given the sort of the Israeli sort of Jewish diaspora history is very long, and the disconnect between Jewish diaspora and Israel is also, huge. Whereas Mongolian diaspora is just relatively first generation. So why would the Mongolian living here would want to send it 14 days training when they could just send them to live with their relatives? Why they don't need this kind of institution because they have relatives. They're still really rooted and connected with their family. Where there are a lot of Jewish people in Israel who have no connection with Israel at all. So that's so what incentive would they have to send to institutional 14 days language learning?
I guess I'll take this one. To answer that question, I think there is quite a bit of incentive, especially for members in the diaspora, because what we've heard from our respondents is that some of their children who are currently have been born in North America, Canada, and US, or who moved at a very young age, they're losing their connection to the Mongolian homeland. So there isn't much opportunity for them to connect in that way. And I guess to further back this up, they've had summer camps in places like Washington, DC, in different areas, I think maybe even Chicago, and they've had summer camps within Mongolia itself. Unfortunately, those haven't been running as smoothly as they would like them to. And due to other certain circumstances, they just more or less closed. But some of our respondents did attend those summer camps that were held in Mongolia. And for them, they gave us the feedback that they really enjoyed and thought that they were productive events that contributed to them being Mongolian, them connecting with their culture, especially stuff that they may not have even known despite them living in Mongolia for quite some time.
We have two hands up, or had two hands up, Ramana and Annie. We are at our time limit, so I'll ask you to keep your questions very brief, 4 minutes, all right? So you've got 1 minute per question, 1 minute per response. Ramana, you've got a projecting voice, go ahead.
This is a question, I guess, more to Hari and Anoushka. Think about the Indian diaspora and their connection with India. If you look at the politics in India for the last 3-4 decades, you probably didn't want the Indian diaspora doing anything there. Have you thought about that possibility in Mongolia going in the far in the future?
Ramana, thank you for this question. And I think I've had these kind of discussions over the past few weeks with so many people. So one reason the Indian diaspora's political inclinations are at the place they are right now is possibly because the first set of governments did not really engage with them properly. Between 1947 and 1971, there seem to have been hardly any engagement. But then you can correct me, but from the literature I have read, it looks like they were considered a brain drain. So they were left alone. They were not considered part of the home community. So this kind of situation can be avoided by maybe having a proactive engagement strategy. So that's something that I can say. Apart from that, having an active engagement strategy will also help the government cultivate support, probably multi-partisan support. They may not associate any one diaspora policy with any one government unless it is ideologically loaded. So I think to avoid the situation of India, probably an active engagement strategy will be helpful.
I know we're short on time, but I'm just going to use this opportunity to plug in that we wrote a piece for The Diplomat that basically spoke about how the Mongolian political landscape and how voting rights for the diaspora can be advocated for. So please read that. That's
Thank you, thank you. And Annie, I'll pass it to you for the final question.
Thank you, Annie. So the age group we have in mind is the age group of people born and living in the US and Canada. So currently we are only looking at US and Canada, and we found that a big section of people are in the like 5 to 14 age group, and these are people who have not learned the language much, have not had much exposure to the language. So this is the kind of age group, the group which doesn't have, which is born in a different country and where Mongolian is not either actively spoken or heard at home. So again, here there could be like divisions based on whether like the like Tamil language program I looked at, actually there were various classifications based on whether both parents spoke Tamil or only one parent spoke Tamil. So it depends on whether the child is able to hear the language on a daily basis. So the program needs to be instituted for children who are necessarily born in a different country and who don't have direct exposure to the language.
I guess to add to that last point, yeah, so about like 5 to 18, second generation, third generations, and hopefully future generations if the program is implemented. And but yeah, with that, I'll just end our presentation. And thank you for the question. I hope that answers your question.